Everyone, welcome to another episode of the 360 Salesforce Mastermind podcast with my co-host Avinash Boyana. Today we have Ian Gotts, who's well known in the industry, especially around tech debt and Elements.cloud. And it was a pleasure having him on talking about the history of Elements, Ian's background, and his thoughts on a lot of different areas. So Avinash, what were some of your key takeaways in the talking with Ian on this episode?
Outside of like Ian being the obvious like thought leader in the Salesforce ecosystem, he writes really deep content on LinkedIn and things like that. What stood out to me the most is how he built the whole business around like process flows, like a process mapping, and that's right. Like with this whole AI agentic era that we are in, the businesses are seeing a need to go back to the drawing board, like to get to the basics of like process flows and process mapping, and that's like the fundamental of like whole Elements.cloud. That's how he built the company. So the fact that he identified, almost like predicted that the industry will go back in time and stick to like process flows and process mapping, I think that's visionary, at least in my opinion. And the other thing was like how we emphasized like consulting firms today need to adapt to the new tools and methodologies that are coming out there in the market, again, with the AI era. And it's become almost like a must-have for these consulting firms to stay relevant. So overall, and it's been very insightful to just, hear his perspective. Almost like, he gave some guidance for the SIs to go forward, almost like a 10-year plan for the SIs who can like listen to this episode and execute on.
Yep, I agree. And it was definitely interesting to hear the background, where he came from, how Elements came about. That's always interesting to hear. And one of the things I recall in talking with Ian is, right, he identified a need in the market. He got feedback from the market. Instead of guessing like a lot of people do on what the market might want, he actually saw the need, saw the challenge, got the feedback from his clients and people he talked to. He did talk about low code, which is a hot topic always in the Salesforce ecosystem. Low code is nice, but how does low code impact tech debt? I know tech debt is a term out there in the industry that people don't like to talk about a lot, but it's extremely important. It's critical. Most Salesforce orgs and systems have tech debt. Even though people don't want to tackle it, it's there. And he talked also about AI, and it's another hot topic in the Salesforce ecosystem. Ramping up on AI tools as a developer, consultant, and admin, etc., and the importance of being skilled and knowledgeable about the new AI tools coming out and how you can leverage that within Salesforce and even outside of Salesforce. But like you mentioned, it is all around the business process mapping, and that's what Elements does. That's Ian's background. So it was definitely an interesting conversation. I know the ecosystem knows Ian very well, so I'm hoping you all enjoy and the audience enjoys the episode. Thanks for joining, Ian.
Thanks.
And just to give some background, we always like to start with the kind of the journey, and even talking about before the Salesforce side of things, when you entered the ecosystem. What did you do before you got into the Salesforce ecosystem?
I was an engineer, and then I joined Accenture, and I ran sort of high risk, big transformation projects. I think the biggest project team I had was 500 people on the project team itself. So big projects. Then left to go and set up a software company called Nimbus Partners. We ran that for a few years, and we decided we needed a CRM because we already had a global business. And we were one of Salesforce's earliest customers. I mean, we got sold Salesforce to two guys. The whole of Salesforce in the UK was two guys in a Regis office. So we bought Salesforce when it had like 5 objects in the very earliest days. I spoke at the first London event, which was 120 people, 3 customers. I was one of them, and Mark, and that was it. So we We kind of entered the Salesforce ecosystem as customers in about 2000, 2001. So we've been around a long time and seen it grow. So that's where it all started.
So you had the engineering background already, worked on many projects, kind of had that tech background, engineering background. And I'm assuming I'm guessing, but like when you started using Salesforce, that's where I'm assuming, saw that even Salesforce had something there. And is that kind of how you got interested in going down that direction?
Well, no, so we saw that Salesforce was a great product. We were very early, as we are with lots of things. We were very early into the cloud, and we had said the company I was running, offices around the world. We wanted one single view of the customer. The cloud made that really easy. So that's why, even though Salesforce didn't have very much functionality, the cloud thing really worked for us. Then we built out 280 custom objects because we had to build everything out. So we also got to experience what it was like to really configure Salesforce a lot and then end up with the technical debt associated with that. So we sold that business in 2011. The three of us who were the founders kind of retired, had a couple of years off, and I got the band back together and said, let's do something again. And we went, yeah, we kind of only know how to do one thing, so let's do that again, which was really around how to document business processes. That's what the previous company, Nimbus, did. So we launched Elements to do that, process mapping. But then we went, let's focus on a market. And at that point, Salesforce had big customers. Back in like 2000, it didn't have big customers. We were aimed at the Fortune 500. So when we launched Elements in 2015, 2016, also had big customers. And we went, okay, well, let's solve Salesforce's customer problems because we know what they are because we've lived with them for 20 odd years. So that's where Elements started. And that's why we ended up entering the Salesforce ecosystem as a partner and selling into the ecosystem rather than just purely a customer.
So, and it sounds like at Nimbus, so you did your own customization of Salesforce internally and learned the product for that duration. So it was kind of hands-on. You were able to do it yourselves with your internal team, your internal tech, and you guys. And that's how you ended up learning it.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, we had an admin. Her name was Lucy. And at the time, most of the admins were sort of tech, IT, engineering. And Salesforce ran a marketing campaign called Be Like Lucy, because Lucy was bright, she was business-minded, and they were trying to get the whole idea of low-code, people can go and build this. Lucy actually now works for Salesforce. So she's had a stellar career. It started with us, but obviously she's taken that on since she's joined Salesforce. But that whole idea of like low-code we embraced because we didn't want to be building Apex, but we could build objects, we could build flows. Well, they weren't flows then; they were obviously process builder workflows. But we really embraced the power of Salesforce, and that's really why the ecosystem is so strong today.
So you started off in that whole 2011 to 2015 time frame, and you were like laser focused on process flows, and ever since, like you stuck with it. That's a time where the world was transitioning from waterfall to agile, where process flows were more of an, I know it's inaccurate, but from a perception wise, it always resonates more like a waterfallish to where an agile, where customers have stopped really thinking about process flows because everyone wanted to move fast. The whole agile fever caught up. And today, again, everyone's going back to the drawing board and realizing the importance of process flows. But there was a time when process flows almost like evaporated because people wanted to just be the cool kid on the block, and agile was the thing. So how hard or how difficult for it were you to just remind people, like, stick to the basics, like agile is cool. Agile doesn't mean, because I used to hear this a lot of time when good people used to say, agile doesn't mean no documentation. It's a process that it doesn't mean you just throw the paper out of the window and just go do a wild west. So how difficult was it to like ground people?
It's really hard. Okay, so I think first of all, you made a really important point. People went, oh, agile means we don't need to plan or we don't need to document. Like that's wrong. That's not how it works. Then you put low code in, people go, oh, I don't need to plan. I can just build. And if it's not right, I'll rebuild it. All of that is, I think, completely flawed. But the problem is that the allure of, oh, don't worry, I don't need to worry about it. I can just, if it doesn't work, I can make a change and it doesn't cost me anything. That's now coming back to bite people. We look at the levels of technical debt in orgs. So we analyze about 1.5 billion metadata items a month now. So we got some good data. 51% of all custom objects never get used. Between 40% and 80% of all custom fields never get populated. That level of technical debt is now weighing down orgs. And that technical debt is entirely because people haven't thought about the analysis. So yeah, I think there's been a bit of a backlash now in terms of let's do the right level of analysis. I'm not suggesting waterfall, which is like 6 months of planning and then we'll start doing things. But there's got to be a balance between that and just going, don't worry, build it. If it's wrong, we'll have another go at it, because the cost of doing that is so big. And I think if we'll get into it, I think a bit later, but the whole world of agents, suddenly agents are underlining or exposing how little documentation there is, how much technical debt there is, how little data governance there is, all the things you need to make agents work. Suddenly it's shining a spotlight on, we didn't do a very good job of actually doing the analysis. So you asked me a question, how hard was it? I think it's binary. You talk to some organizations, they're like, yeah, process, why would we ever need that? And then you talk to other, like anyone who's highly regulated, and they understand it. If you're food and pharma, oil and gas, financial services, any of those organizations, yeah, they get the importance of process. You need to at least have some level of documentation. And those people are the ones who are accelerating away now because they've already got good processes which they can turn into agents. So I think it's coming back to bite, but I think we're actually now being able to take the metadata and automatically draw the process diagrams. So those people who did a bad job of documenting, we can actually fix really quickly now. It's something we're called configuration mining. Takes all the configuration, all the metadata. You ask it a question, it will draw the process maps about how that organization works. So we're almost filling in the gaps for the things that people didn't do.
Because recently I was reading some study where they were sharing that there's been a sudden uptick in BA recruits, which explains, like, one piece of the whole SDLC who can get the process flow right are like those business analysts, like those good business analysts. And to your point, the whole agent era has exposed the need for process flows. So which explains why there's this need for like more BAs.
But also when you think about agents, okay, we're not just slapping an agent on top of a bad process or a broken process. That's what I call your mess for less. Does it faster, but it just does we should be using the catalyst of agents in particular areas. I'm not suggesting the whole business can be agents, but looking at certain areas of the business going, that could be an agent. But also that bit of the business process is probably limited by the way a human would work. A human's not going to read a 200-page document before they do anything. They're not going to make sure they've read every product spec to make sure nothing's changed. They're not going to try things from 5 different directions and work out what the best one is. But an agent will do that. So we can look at some of those business processes through the eyes of an agent without obviously there are limitations with agents, but without some of the human limitations. So that business analyst coming back asking the question, well, okay, why did we do it that way? Oh, well, because we didn't have all the data. Yeah, but what if the agent had all that data? Okay, we could do the business analysis is really important because they can come at it from a different perspective and come back with a better view of how a business process might operate, and then draw the diagrams. So we've got a shared agreement on what it could be, and those diagrams will build the agents. So I think there is a role for this, but I think it's a light touch way of doing documentation rather than, as you said, the waterfall way, which is when the level of documentation or the size of the documentation equals the size of the project, we can now go ahead, which is where it used to be.
Yeah. And to go back, that this is really awesome conversation. And to go back when you launched Elements.cloud, Ian, you guys saw the need for tech debt, the issues in the current orgs, etc. What did the initial version of Elements look like, even from just the technical side, or what it was doing? How you guys saw things evolve in the first 1 to 2 years? Did you just nail it right away? Was it more of a beta thing that you tried out, or kind of what did that initial Elements.cloud year or two look like?
No, it's been perfect from the very beginning. We had
Of course.
20 vision. Okay, so we started by basically building process mapping, and a bunch of clients went, this is great. And we started with a freemium model, but then people came to us and said, I get the process. I love that. But if you could tell me what's in the org, that would be even better. So we almost put the process mapping got to a certain point and we were good with that. And we then focused all our energies on building metadata dictionaries and all the dependencies. But at the very beginning, when we had the process mapping capability, people came to us and said, so I'm assuming the diagrams draw themselves. And we went, well, no, how do we do that? And I guess the last 9 years have been actually trying to do that. And that's why I talked about it just earlier about configuration mining. That is really where our North Star has been, which is how do we bring the process world together and the metadata world and go, could you build those diagrams automatically? We didn't think it was possible, but we've now managed to do it. And it's staggering the difference it's now making. And we talked to a customer the other day who said they'd spent $500,000 with one of the biggest consulting firms and 6 months documenting how their business worked, their org worked. We did that in 5 minutes. And it's not just the speed, it's also the accuracy, because we got it to automatically draw the process. So they went, that's not how the org works. And we went, no, it is. And they went, yeah, I guess so. So it's not even how they thought it worked or how it was written down. It's how it actually works, because it's looking at all the permissions, all the profiles, all the record types, all the workflows, the apex, and it's putting those all together. So it's almost when you're building on top of technical debt, the first question is like, well, why are those people able to raise an opportunity? They shouldn't be able to do that. Well, because of those permission sets are giving them access we didn't expect them to have. So not only are you getting a view of the process, but you're also getting a view of data governance, security vulnerability. We've now built something called Agent Finder. So it'll look at the diagram and it'll pop out and write a business requirement and say that could be an agent. So there's quite a lot of stuff you can do sitting on top of that. None of which we had as a vision when we first started. Obviously, we didn't even know what an agent was 9 years ago. Right. But I think what you have to do is you have to be flexible. You have to listen to customers and go, okay, are we having enough customers saying that is important enough for us to go and build? And I think in the early days, the difficulty is you could go in so many different directions. And it's having the confidence to say, no, let's stick with this long enough with the development team to build this out, rather than having a crisis of confidence every 3 months and going, oh, that's not working. Let's go over there. That's not working. Sometimes it takes quite a long time to build a product which is credible enough for an enterprise to buy. My world's not B2C. I'm sure you can spin up a B2C product relatively quickly, but B2B takes a lot longer. We architected it correctly from the day one. That's one thing we did get right, because we knew what the potential was. But in terms of direction, core functionality, that's evolved over time.
So how is this sitting with other SI partners? Because if we are talking like a 6-month implementation by a big four, not implementation, if it's a 6-month engagement with a big four done in 5 minutes, that's a whole project team plus all the free points, free hotel stay, nice food and drink, the motivation for students to join a consulting firm, all those perks are like literally gone. So
no. I didn't say. So that was a 6-month document discovery piece. Okay, that the client really perceives no value from that. They have to do it from compliance perspective. Every project starts with discovery. The client's sitting there going, well, why can't you get on with real work? So if you talk to any consulting firm, that discovery, if they could do it in 5 minutes or 2 hours and end up with a better result, as far as they're concerned, that's all good. Then they can get on and start spending the client's money on like solutioning, helping them transform, but also using it from a perspective of we understand how the business, what you've currently got. My life as a consultant, there's nothing worse than walking into a client. You've said how long it's going to take. A week into the project, you go, we've discovered a whole bunch of things we didn't realize. It's now going to take, it's going to take 3 months longer. It's going to cost an extra 20%. That level of confidence going in, where we have a clear view about where you are, where you started. I mean, I think the only consulting firms are the ones who go, we were making good money out of doing that, are not going to be in business anyway. They're not adding enough value. I mean, when there are none of the top consulting firms we're working with see this as a disadvantage. They see it all as a way of actually driving the value out of Salesforce, not just Salesforce, out of the business far more quickly and getting a lot more focused, working with the customer on the right things.
So if SI partner is listening to this, they should be pursuing Elements.cloud is almost like a tool that would help them get to the current state faster and quicker so that they can focus more on the to-be state or the real problem.
I mean, I would say that, but whether it's Elements.cloud or anything else that helps you do this discovery, the days of being able to walk into a client and go, well, we'll just have a poke around set up and see what we find. Surely those days have got to be over. That's amateur hour. I always tell the story about doctors have X-ray machines now, and they have they have a whole bunch of machines that will very quickly tell you your health. If you walked into a doctor's and they went, we don't have X-rays or MRI scanners. We just tend to we'll squeeze your arms and see what it is, and we'll taste your urine because that's a good way of working out blood sugar. Like, really, that's how we used to work in the 1800s. I'll find another doctor, and I think we're going to get that in the Salesforce world, which is unless you've got a suite of tooling which helps you do this analysis, they're going to find another consulting firm, and so it's going to be table stakes. You're going to have this tooling, otherwise, and particularly in the agentic world where things are moving so quickly, and there's no point. You do a 6-month discovery piece of work. The next consulting firm has helped their competitor drive 4 agents and drive a ton of value by the time you've done the discovery. That's not going to wash anymore. And this tooling is affordable. Like for us, it's $1,000 per year per consultant. I mean, if you can't afford that, then why are you in business as a consultant? So it's not something which is something which a consultant should be going, I can't do this. I'll use a few Excel spreadsheets and poke around setup, and the client will pay for that because the clients are getting a lot sharper. They recognize what's out there.
You know that on this topic, I've had many conversations, many SIs. The 2 words that make potential clients cringe is tech debt, right? And discovery, kind of what we've been talking about, or like assessments. And typically they don't want to pay for it. Like, cause even if they understand this is a question, if they do understand their tech debt, I think it sounds, first of all, they don't like paying for it, like you mentioned, especially when it was bodies. But even the term makes like CFOs or let's say an IT director kind of cringe. And I wish there was a better term for the industry, but it truly is. It's technical debt. It's a well-defined term. How have you seen getting over those discussions when you're talking about tech debt, getting them to open their mind, their checkbook, all that kind of stuff, and getting around some of the negative thoughts or views from clients, CFOs, directors, VPs on tech debt in general and why it's important?
I mean, another way of phrasing this is org complexity. That's not necessarily bad. You may have a very complex business and therefore you have a complex org. I mean, it's just because you've got a simple org doesn't mean it's good. Just because you've got a complex org doesn't mean it's bad. I remember I've been presenting quite a bit about tech debt, and people feel tech debt is caused because you took some shortcuts or you made some bad decisions. Salesforce 3 times a year gives us tech debt. They came and said, right, we're now flow, process builder workflows no longer used. That's tech debt. So as Salesforce launches new functionality, some of the things you've already built may well be obsolete. But the point is, not all tech debt's bad. Some tech debt that's slowing you down is bad, and we need to resolve it relatively quickly. But some things, fine, you've got a process builder workflow which works perfectly well. You're never going to change it. It's an area that works well. Don't think that's tech debt. That's not an issue. So I think that the issue is not whether you've got tech debt, but whether you understand the scale of tech debt and the impact it's having on your ability to drive more value, change the way Salesforce works, which supports the way the business wants to change. And I think the bit is the evaluation of it and then working out what to do with it rather than just going, we've got loads of it, because that doesn't matter.
Right. Because it's still, what do you do with it? And it definitely sounds like Elements compresses that time dramatically. So I guess coming to the recent, what does Elements look like now? Is it growing internally? Are you adding different variations and aspects of Elements, or has it been the same for the most part the last couple of years? Or what's kind of the current state of Elements.cloud look like?
Okay, so every technology company, we're growing. I think what we've seen a massive acceleration in terms of capabilities, mainly because we're building on top of other capabilities. So it's taken us a long time to get all of that metadata. It's quite difficult pulling the metadata out, but also doing all the metadata dependency analysis. So you've got to look at every single metadata type. Is it used in every other metadata type? And there's no shortcuts. AI won't do that for you. It is lots of hard coding going let's look at the 42 different ways that a field could be embedded in a process builder workflow. Let's look at how record types store. So there's just a ton of code we'd had to do to pull out that metadata and all the dependencies. And it's not just is a thing used, but how it's used and where it's used. And that's enabled us to go and build this thing called configuration mining, because it can now look at all of the metadata, how it's used, and start to build that picture. And again, that configuration mining is not AI. There's a little bit of AI at the front end, but there's just a ton of code to build that picture. I think the specification was 60 pages long. Now we've got that picture of like, we can build a picture about how the business operates from a process perspective, sitting Agent Finder on top of that. So we worked out what some of the criteria were for what words to look for, what nuances in those processes to work out where could we find agents. But then we also looked and went, there's more than one sort of agent. There's workflow, which is just workflow, not agents. There's agentic workflow, which is quite deterministic. It's workflow with an agent front end, or there is a true conversational agent. We had some criteria. We then used that to then look at the process diagrams. So everything we're doing, we're building on top of the last thing. So we're now looking at that going, well, that's great. Now we've got all of that. Now we could go automatically from we've identified the agent opportunity to, well, why don't we use our own internal agent to go and build the agent for you? So the whole world of how do we get from a messy org, we don't understand what happens, to we've now got an understanding from a business process, but now we can automatically identify where we could apply agents. Well, now we can go, let's help you write the agent's instructions, which will then build you the agent. And then you go to the next stage, which is, well, could that agent look back at the metadata and understand how it could improve itself? Yeah, maybe we could do that too. So you can see we're building on top of every layer, we're building on top of it. So about 9 months ago, when everything launched around agents, we went, I guess we're irrelevant now. Where's that going to fit? And it's quite a concerning time inside the organization. And we realized actually the process piece, the business analysis piece, everything we're doing is even more important in an agentic world. And we've seen a real inflection point. Suddenly it's gone from you're not relevant to absolutely everybody's going, we need that configuration piece. We need configuration mining. We need the agent finder for us. So I think we've actually seen an acceleration in the last 3, 4, 5 months, and particularly with our relationship with Salesforce. When you've got a bit of tooling like us and some of the other companies out there, and you're out there highlighting that there's lots of technical debt, the account execs in Salesforce don't want you near their account. The last thing they want you to do is go, oh no, you shouldn't be buying more capabilities because it's too difficult to absorb. Right. Now we can expose how they can apply more Salesforce licenses, or how they can apply Agentforce. We're suddenly being brought into accounts. So that's the other thing that's changed, is I think our relationship with Salesforce, yeah, we've been a partner, but actually the customer facing teams now see us as a true partner rather than necessarily an irritant on the side going, but please don't get near the account and tell them how bad it is. I think that's always been the challenge, I think, over the years, is how you partner effectively with Salesforce, where you can help the customers.
How does one get started with Elements.cloud? What are some of the prerequisites that they need to have internally sorted first before they can be ready to use your product?
I think the answer before was that they needed to have a good understanding about how they wanted to approach technical debt. I think the idea of now we can, and it was always, I've installed Elements, it now has brought out a metadata dictionary. What am I meant to do now? And that always felt like a bit of a lift. It wasn't a training issue. It was like, what use case am I trying to address? We've seen that change quite dramatically. Now we can go install it. It will say, tell me how my opportunity process works, because it's done all of that work for you, versus having to find a business analyst who would go and make sense of the dictionary, go and draw process diagrams. That always felt a bit of a lift. Now we can, out of the box, relatively quickly go, at least we've given you something. So that's helped. The other thing I think is this whole agent is forcing people to think about, like, where should we apply an agent? Even if they're not getting started now, it's still making everyone go, is our data in decent shape? Do we have any good data governance? Is technical debt going to hold us back? So it's immediately, I think, given a focus for clients about where they might apply it. Now, so that's one area of the world. The other area is Salesforce has still got a big business where people are driving changes, they're trying to make changes. And I think there's a realization that people need to have a better handle on just how they drive that Salesforce, the software development lifecycle. So how does someone get started? Number one, you need a project. This is not, we'd love one of it. You need a project. Is it, we're implementing, Health Cloud, or we're about to migrate to a new cloud, or we're looking at how we improve our opportunity process, or it may be agents. And it starts with that project, that catalyst. And that's why people are coming to us.
So does the usage or impact vary between first-time Salesforce customer versus a Salesforce customer who's been like a customer for like 10 years with lots and lots of metadata?
Okay, a first-time customer, if they've never been around the block before, will probably believe that this is easy and all I need to do is just flick a few switches and I've got it configured. And you talk to them about you should need to document things, and they're like, why? If they've implemented Salesforce before, but they're starting again with a green field, then absolutely they'll have a conversation with us. So a customer who's had 2 or 3 years worth of Salesforce, probably have had a couple of SIs in the org, there's nothing written down, is probably a customer who understands the pain and could build a business case. We're not free, so they can build a business case. I say we're not free. We actually now have a freemium model. So the bottom end, build an agent, map processes, that's free. But if you want to get into looking at metadata, that's clearly our professional level. And then there's enterprise if you want to really get into the configuration mining. So that you need to build a business case. And I think the more experienced customers, they understand how to build that business case. And we're getting engaged with, the product owner, the CIO, who's having a conversation about why this need to help not just one group like the admin. It's helping the admin, it's helping the business analysts, it's helping the architects, it's helping the developers. They have a broader picture about how this can improve that the money they're spending on Salesforce, how they get better value more quickly.
You've been around for a while. You've seen a ton. I have two questions I kind of have that are one of the main discussion points that are just even going around in the Salesforce ecosystem. Because when we talk AI, there's agents, but there's a flip side also on Salesforce consultants, developers, everyone in the ecosystem, and how AI is disrupting the platform, how people do their job, how to leverage it. There's all these apps and tools coming up. I guess in general, what are your thoughts on just how the overall AI side of things is impacting the ecosystem in general, even outside of agents and the platform capabilities?
Good. So we had an all hands for the company a couple of days ago, and I started off. My deck had #relentless. That's how it currently feels. Like a quarter feels like a year, a month feels like a quarter. That's the first thing. I think AI is disrupting every single industry, and it's certainly, as you just said, it's impacting every aspect of the ecosystem. AIs can be more effective, developers can be more effective. The consultants unless you're an expert in an area, in a cloud, in an industry, it's very easy to be replicated by AI. There was an Economist article, The Economist being a sort of a fairly well-read magazine, rather like Fortune magazine. They had one of their leaders, which was, is Accenture relevant in the year of AI? I mean, so it's hitting at every level. And the only real protection is strong IP, intellectual property. So as a software business, obviously, we've got code. But if you're a consultant, your IP is your knowledge of an industry, your knowledge of a discipline. So you're great at field service for oil and gas, and you understand the oil and gas version of Salesforce. So it's, and I said that I made the comment, which is AI punishes mediocrity and it elevates experience or expertise. And mediocrity is quite an emotive term, but the point is, if you say no Salesforce, the answer is that's like saying I know computers. It's like Salesforce is so broad. What do you really? And then how can you apply it? So I think we're going to get an almost AI divide, which is if you don't understand it, if you're not doubling down on particular sets of skills, then you can lean into those. You're going to get dropped, and those people who have got the expertise are going to get elevated really quickly. So now is not the time to be going, AI is not really relevant. I'm sure it'll pass. You need to get in and start doing stuff. And and build those AI muscles. If you will, let me just use a good example. I play bass in a band. We play corporate events, we play festivals and so on. So at the end of the gig, we need to pay the people. We need to pay our band members. If we have subs, so substitutes, if a band member can't play, we have to pay them. We pay a sound engineer. And there are some rules. So the band members get mileage, they get drive-over toll, and they get a split of the fee. Subs get a flat fee. So we built an agent to do that. So you simply say, it knows where all the band members live, and it says, asks you, how much was the fee, who played in the band, and where was the gig? And you give it that, and it goes, there you are, I've applied the rules, I've worked out. And then you can ask some questions and go, actually, can you reduce the marketing percentage and give each of the band members a bit more? It took us an hour to build that agent. Drew an agent diagram for how it worked. We spat out the instructions, and that built the agent. Now, you've got to get to a point where you can do that stuff really quickly, not, we agonized for 3 weeks, and you've got to get to the point where it works really quickly. And that idea of an agent diagram rather than just writing the instructions is really important, because I'm not the band manager. I had a conversation with the band manager to say, how do you do the calculation? That would be really hard if I'd given, there were 17 instructions, tell me where this is wrong. Instead, we could look at a diagram. Together, we could go, oh, no, that's not how it works. I do this, this, and this. And then when we built the first cut of the agent, it didn't work. Well, it did work, but it didn't. She said, oh, no, look, it's double the amount of money that you give everyone for mileage. That's wrong. So we went back and looked at the diagram, the agent diagram, and it said, calculate the mileage. When she does it, she just looks at where the gig is, and she looks at that's one distance and doubles it. And the agent went, I know that you've got to get there and get back. If we'd said, calculate the mileage to get there, so you have to be quite accurate in terms of the words. You don't get to that if you're sitting on the outside going, either agents are easy to build because I built one on Trailhead, or I don't want to do it. You've got to get in and start building them from scratch on things that you understand that work. And then you build up that agent muscle. So as usual, it's a very long answer to a very short question, but you've got to get in and start using it. And maybe it's home things. Maybe it's stuff you're doing outside of work, or it's work things, but you've got to start getting into this and start using it and playing around with it to build those muscles. Otherwise, people who already got those muscles will be sprinting ahead of you.
You mentioned about agent lookup or looker. So when you start talking about looking up for agents, are we talking about looking up agents within Agentforce, or agents outside of the Salesforce ecosystem too?
Well, I think the first thing is that an Agentforce is a great agent platform. And of course, the power is that it's linking back into metadata, and it's linking back to the data that's sitting inside Salesforce, flows and prompt templates. But that example for the band, I wrote it. I threw it into Agentforce just because it worked. But I also threw it into ChatGPT, because it doesn't require any data that's sitting inside Salesforce. If the band was run on Salesforce and I'd stored all the band addresses in Salesforce, then I'd run Agentforce and go and get the data. I didn't need to. Play around with that, whether it's Gemini Gems for Google or it's ChatGPT. Those are agent platforms. They are really good platforms that work just the same way. Or use Agentforce with a dev org. You don't have to connect it to all of the data. When you're playing around with it, you can say, pretend you've got an opportunity. And it goes, okay, I'll do that. And it will spoof as though it's got an opportunity. So you can start playing around with it.
That's interesting, because I think you might have touched on it, Rick. And my other question I had in mind is, what do you feel you understand or about the Salesforce ecosystem that many or most in the ecosystem don't get or don't understand?
That's a great question. Okay, so I think that platform owners quite often who are purchasing Salesforce don't recognize what the true cost of ownership of Salesforce is. It's training for your own teams. It's consultancy if you need consultants. It's the tooling. It's things like Elements.cloud, but it's also backup. It's DevOps. It's data quality. All of those tools don't come in Salesforce. Other platforms, if you go to SAP, those things they're all part of the platform, but they're not part of the platform. My analogy is that people buy a Ferrari, Salesforce, and they go, oh, a friend of mine knows a recipe for making fuel out of potatoes, and then I've got a friend of mine over there will do all the maintenance for free. No. You can't afford a Ferrari and everything it takes to run it properly. Buy a Honda and allocate enough budget to have the maintenance, to have the proper fuel in it to learn to drive it properly. So I think that's one thing which people come into it. They see the cost of Salesforce licenses as the true cost. And the moment you start, you don't back it up. You don't have a way of understanding metadata. You don't have a way of in looking at data quality. You don't have the right training for your teams. You're never going to get the benefit out of Salesforce. And it ultimately is going to cost you more in the long run. Or you're going to get to a point and go, Salesforce doesn't work and you're going to throw it away. And that's clearly not true. Salesforce absolutely works, but you need to know how to use it. Agentforce sitting on top of that. Unless you devote some time and energy to understanding how to use Agentforce properly, you're never going to get the value out of it. And I think that's part of that divide where we're seeing those people who've understood the value. Often it's the bigger organizations who are leaning in and doing it properly.
Makes sense. Makes sense. I know we always end with one question, Avinash. I just wanted to see if you had another thing for Ian before we wrap up with the last one.
Yeah, go for it.
Awesome. Well, so Ian, thank you for being on the podcast, Elements.cloud. Very insightful. Awesome. I definitely wanted to get into your band and music, but we didn't have time to get into that. Maybe for episode 2, if we do it again as a follow-up. But so I guess, where do you see Ian Gotts and Elements.cloud being? Where do you foresee that in the next 3 to 5 years? And where is Ian Gotts and Elements going?
I mean, fine. It's been a real question. When you think of the speed that the business is now moving and that with AI, trying to predict 3 to 5 years is really hard. But let me answer the question a different way. I think we need to be nimble enough to make sure we can stay relevant. And the vision we've got in terms of what are the key foundations, whether it doesn't matter what business you're in, provided you understand how the business operates, you've got a good understanding about data governance, data quality. You understand how you've configured your systems, like that, as in your metadata. If you've got that picture, that sort of digital twin of your company, that means that you are prepared, you can move and you can be agile. From an Elements perspective, we want to be that digital twin, not just for Salesforce, but for like the CIO's entire estate. And we've architected Elements to be, it's on AWS, it's not on the Salesforce platform, which means we can do that for every single platform. So that was always the vision from day one. How do we become the CIO's view about all of their businesses? Are we there? We're not there yet. We're clearly focused on the Salesforce market, but we're now looking at and working with some of those adjacent products. 3 to 5 years? No idea where we'll be, but I know that we will be continuing to drive that message, which is, if you build the right thing, if you understand what you've got, if you've got good foundations, we'll be relevant to businesses and they'll want to use our technology. That's that side. On a personal side, if we can be building a business that people want to be in, I think there are too many businesses that get big. It's driven by strong egos and therefore toxic's too strong a word, but it's not somewhere people want to be. Then I think we failed. Life's not measured by salary or by how much stuff you've bought. I think it's measured by the sorts of people who want to be around you and the relationships you build. And that may sound a little bit soppy, but actually I think we only get one go at life. We're only on the planet once. So I think building, a profitable business, a business that's doing good, but actually being around people who you want to be working with, that's really important. And we built that with Nimbus. We're building that again with Elements, and we're attracting people who are fun to be around. And I think that's important. That gets us all energized every day.
Awesome. Yeah, it's great perspective. I can even feel that your energy and passion for all this as well, just even talking to you and having this discussion with Avinash and us. So thank you very much for being on, Ian. Very good info. Looking forward to the next 3 to 5 years and see where Elements goes. And it was great having you on the podcast today.
Right. Thank you so much for inviting me. Thanks, guys.